As we just saw, the microphone needs to go into what's called a preamp to boost it up to what's called line level so that all of our signal processing devices and tape machines and computers can record efficiently because they can't really use mic level, they need to use line level. Well, if you're using, like, say, a $400 mixing board, with 40 knobs on it, those little preamps inside of the board are really very inexpensive. One of the ways for a low amount of money that you can greatly improve your sound is to use an external preamp. What an external preamp does is you plug the mic in it, which is mic level, it boosts it up to line level, and what comes out can be processed by things like signal processors, reverbs, echoes, delays, all that, which we'll see in a second, or a tape machine. So the best way to record, if you can get a more expensive little preamp, some of them are $100, $200. You go from the microphone into the preamp, then from the preamp straight into your computer or straight into your tape machine and bypass the mixing board. Because this preamp is, say, $100 as opposed to, say, a $10 preamp that's inside of a mixing board. So one of the ways to improve the sound quality is to get an external preamp, plug your mic into the external preamp, and then go directly from the preamp into your tape machine and computer, bypassing the inexpensive mixing board. Here's an example. What I use in my studio is I use actually quite expensive preamps, which are one knob off of like $1 million console. I go from a really great microphone into this one knob, which boosts the level up to line level, and then into my computer. So literally, I get the quality of a multi-million-dollar studio in my home recording studio. One thing I want to mention here, because some of you will be using very inexpensive microphones, is the difference between high impedance and low impedance microphones. You don't really need to know what impedance is. You just need to know that you plug high impedance microphones into a high impedance input on the mixing board, which is usually the 1/4 inch input, which we'll see in a second, and low impedance microphones into a low impedance input on a mixing board, which is the XLR. If you're trying to plug a high impedance like a 1/4 inch cable into a mic input, you'll need what's called a transformer. It takes the high impedance, say like from a guitar, and it changes it to low impedance so you can plug it into a mic input on a mixing board. We're dealing with two different things, which we'll see in a second, mic level and line level. But all you need to do is to understand that you need to plug high impedance microphones into high impedance inputs or the 1/4 inch input on a mixing board, and low impedance microphones into the low impedance input or the XLR plug on the mixing board. And if you need to plug one into the other, you need to use what's called a transformer, which actually changes high impedance to low impedance or low impedance into high impedance. The way to tell if a microphone is high impedance or low impedance, simply look at it. It says high Z, which means impedance, or low Z, which means impedance. The reason you need to plug high impedance mics into high impedance inputs and low impedance mics into low impedance inputs, or if you're switching, you need to use what's a transformer, is because if you plug the wrong one into the wrong plug, you're going to lose a lot of power. Let's take a second to look at the different types of cords and plugs that we're going to be using in recording. The first one that we'll look at is an XLR plug. It's got 3 pins in it right here. This is most commonly used for plugging in microphones. There is one other application that it's used for I've seen in PA systems, but in recording studios I can't really recall of any time I've ever used it for anything other than plugging in a microphone. The next one that we're going to look at is a Midi cable. We're going to be studying MIDI in depth in another video, But this is a Midi cable. It's got 5 pins in it, and it's used to plug in different types of keyboards and sound modules to each other. This is a 1/4-inch cable, which is commonly used in guitars and keyboards, often called a guitar cable, and it just plugs into the guitar or directly into the mixing board. We'll be using this one for doing line-in plugins, as we'll see in a second as we're looking at the mixing console. And the last one here is called an RCA plug. It's got the little tip and the ring around it, and this is most commonly used for plugging in tape machines.